She was known for her remarkable mind.
Chicago newspaper readers read regular stories about
Alice Mabel Gray.
She's a legend around here, so...
She was a bit different.
At age 34, she quit her job in Chicago.
She left the city behind to live wild.
Nymph of the lake or something.
In the sand dunes on the shores of Lake Michigan.
Reappearing only as a barefoot woman living in a shack by the lake.
She only brought with her a blanket, a cup, a knife, and a gun.
They told Chicago newspaper reporters about a beautiful maiden.
Sometimes glowing, sometimes nude.
They didn't even know this lady.
She was somewhat aloof.
Look at this, dude. That's just a bucket of chestnuts.
Her voice helped protect the dunes.
A free life.
The locals were shocked. A woman living alone in the wilderness?
Like she was some kind of sideshow freak or something, you know what I mean?
Why the hell would you have a bucket of chestnuts, bro?
This mystery woman had no story.
She swam in the lake, she studied stars at night, and lived simply.
So she had to learn how to survive pretty quickly.
She wrote essays, gave speeches, and became a symbol of resistance to industrial expansion.
I wanted my own life.
So who was she really? Was she a visionary?
They called her Diana of the Dunes.
On March 25, 1881, in McKinley Park, Chicago, a woman named Alice Mabel Gray was born to Ambrose and Sally Gray. She was an Aries sun and an Aquarius moon. Aries rising. Alright, so I'm recording this in 2025. It's exactly 100 years after Alice Gray dies. That's just coincidental. Didn't plan for that. That down there is Indiana Dunes National Park. And then over there is Indiana Dunes State Park. They're not the same thing, but they basically are. Indiana Dunes National Park was only recognized fairly recently. And then before that, it was a National Lakeshore, which is basically the same thing. But anyways, it's kind of fucking confusing. They're just like nestled together. It's Indiana Dunes is basically what it is. And then over there you have Ogden Dunes, which is another state park that is only significant to the story because later Alice and her boyfriend Paul go and build a second, slightly bigger and more private shack in Ogden Dunes, down closer to Chicago. But there's dune parks all the way up Lake Michigan. And the best one by a huge margin is Sleeping Bear Dunes. They're just like way bigger. There's not that many dunes, but they're fucking massive. Like it'll blow your fucking mind. These Indiana Dunes are fun more because it's a beach and there's really cool habitats. The dunes are cool, but they're not that big. The biggest one is right there. It's called Mount Tom. It looks like nothing from up here. If you're standing down there, it is actually pretty big. It's pretty cool. And it's pretty cool. Okay, so I know you're going to get hyperfixated on this, and we just don't really have time to get deep into it. So I'm riding around in the Gump right now. The Gump is a fictional creature created by L. Frank Baum in his sequel book to The Wizard of Oz, The Marvelous Land of Oz. A Gump can be created by strapping two couches together with rope and then adding a broom as a tail/rudder, palm fronds as wings, and then the head of a mounted moose. Although in the Oz books, it's not actually a moose, it's a creature called a Gump. And then they call the final creature that they bring to life the Gump. In my case, I could not find a Gump head, so I attached the skull of a white-tailed deer. To bring the inanimate assemblage alive, you have to sprinkle it with a powder of life. Powder of life is a substance created by the Crooked Magician, and it goes for about $2,000 a gram. I know that's going to be really distracting, and you're probably going to look for some correlation. Wizard of Oz, the Gump, no connection to Indiana Dunes, to Alice Gray, to me even really. It's just an arbitrary method of transportation. Like, think of it like a car. Except he does have thoughts and feelings, and I recently realized that he cannot die. I think he might be immortal, I don't know what to do about this. We're just gonna fucking move past it. It's just how I'm getting around, how I'm looking at things. Just don't worry about it. We're focused on Alice Gray here, okay? All right, so Mount Tom down there, somewhere around this, there were other people living, like Alice wasn't the first person to go live nomadically in the dunes. There's these books by Earl H. Reed, The Dune Country and Sketches in Duneland, which are seemingly true stories of like these funny backwoods characters that would like smoke cigars and fuck around with each other and like get into all kind of hijinks and shit, build shacks, and they would fish and I don't know, all this shit. They might be like fictionalized stories, but I think they at least have some truth to them. And he seems to be presenting them as if they're entirely true, but some of them are like too good to exist. I also just need more people to read them because they're so good books. Anyways, so there's other people living here. This guy named George Bragg, some random person like this, built a shack and then died or fucked off or whatever. And then Alice, when she moved here, she moved into George Bragg's shack, which was somewhere near Mount Tom, close to the shore. It's no longer there, obviously, anymore. It's long gone. So my goal is to go and visit that. But so how do you do that? So now we got to get into time travel. And this is going to be a whole other thing that I just need you to kind of go with. So this is the device of time journeying. The device of time journeying was created in the Age of Dreams by an unknown person for an unknown purpose. Originally, the device was not able to be used by anyone except for the original creator who was lost to time. However, a gnome named Nemish was able to get his hands on the device and manipulate it so that it can work for anyone. The device allows the user to travel anywhere in time or space, but not both. If you choose to travel in time, you cannot pick which place you will end up. If you choose to travel to a specific place, you cannot choose which time to end up. Traditionally, the device only works by stating where you would like to go and then repeating this specific verse. Long story short, we're gonna time travel, okay? But I don't have control over where I land. However, it does have a kind of MacGuffin-y or plot device quality. So instead of reading the normal activation phrase that you're supposed to read, I'm going to read this poem called Childe Harold's Pilgrimage by Lord Byron.
A poem by Lord Byron caught her attention.
That supposedly had a large influence over Alice and was partially the reason why she wanted to live out here. So I'm hoping that by reading this poem instead of the normal phrase, it'll keep me in this general Indiana Dunes vicinity, because otherwise I don't really fucking know what I'm gonna do, because then I'll be stuck in the 1900s in like, I don't know, rural Ohio or some shit like that. But whatever, we'll figure it out. So I'm gonna leave all my shit here. I'm just gonna take my camera so that I can document this. Leaving my backpack. I don't want any Back to the Future sports almanac shenanigans. Fuck all that. I'm doing this safe. No one does time travel safe. All the movies, they all get into these. I'm not fucking around, okay? Alice moved out in 1915. I'm thinking we'll go a year later, like 1960. Actually, let's do 1917. I've been thinking about sevens a lot. I don't know why. We're gonna go to 1917 in July, I guess, because it's July right now. We'll do July 7th. Okay, so we're going to go to 1917, July 7th, by reading this poem by Lord Byron. Got it? Everyone cool with this? I'm going to go back in time. We're going to see what's out there. There is a pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. There is society where none intrudes. By the deep lake and music in its roar. I love not man the less, but nature more. From these are interviews in which I steal from all I may be or have been before, to mingle with the universe and feel what I can ne'er express, yet cannot all conceal. This is an essay entitled Chicago's Kinland by Alice Gray. It was read on April 6, 1917 at Fullerton Hall in Chicago, Illinois. Chicago is used to thinking of herself as the child of Lake Michigan, in the prosaic sense of her commercial origin. For the lake not only gave her waterborne trade, but deflected the land routes between east and northwest so as to make her the inevitable railroad center of the country. The lake is literally her alma mater, the mother who fed her. But when we come to form myths on our geological knowledge, as the Greeks did on their guesses, as to the origin of our city, we shall think of her as the child of Lake Michigan in a more poetic sense. The Great Glacier, or ice sheet, which once extended over the Middle West down to the Ohio River, melted gradually, covering the surface level and deep with its rich black soil, until it had reached about the present limits of Chicago. Here the glacier stopped and stood still for a long time, leaving a deeper deposit which forms a ridge a few miles wide encircling the Chicago plain. This runs from Maywood and LaGrange through Palos Springs to Dyer, Indiana, and thence northeast to within 3 or 4 miles of the lake shore. As the glacier melted further, the water stood in a little lake between the ridge and the ice, with its outlet to the southwest plains of the Des Plaines River. This lake, which, as its level lowered, retreated to the east and north and finally found a northern outlet, has for obvious reasons been given the name of Lake Chicago, though it might be said to be Lake Michigan in her childhood. So the glacier, which came down from the north to give Illinois its chief treasure, its deep, rich soil, tarried at Chicago on the way back to give birth to the lake. The lake, when it retreated, left the Chicago plain leveled, ready for the city. To the east, in Indiana, it left a somewhat narrower strip of fine, level sand. In this, the northwest wind, having shared with Chicago its vigor and joy and renewed its delight as it passed over the lake, has molded the dunes. Jesus. Okay, so we are out in the dunes, which I'm considering a win, and we're not that far from Chicago. Maybe that's like an hour or two walk. Although it is, so I forgot to specify a time. That's important, but that's okay. It's just evening, so we'll camp out somewhere in the dunes, and then I'll do the walk down to where the parking lot will one day be, and that's roughly where Alice's Camp Driftwood was located. We don't exactly know where, but we'll find out. Before we do that, I think I'll do like a quick ecology lesson. So this stuff here you can see with the very recognizable seed heads here are, this is marram grass. Its Latin name is Amyophylla, which amyo means fortifying, phylla means loving. Marram grass is by far the most important species in many dune habitats, but I think especially Indiana dunes. Around this time, as in the early 1900s, there was a lot of renewed interest in preserving natural spaces in the country. Like there was the Sierra Club out west, which was fighting to get public support and government legislation to protect lots of different important habitats like Yellowstone and stuff like that. So there was a similar, smaller movement in the Midwest, mostly focused in Chicago because there's a lot of academics there, and there was specifically a prairie club, but there was also lots of other independent groups and stuff like that that wanted to preserve habitats. And because Indiana Dunes was right next to Chicago, it was kind of emblematic for all of this. There was a professor at the University of Chicago named Henry Chandler Powells who would bring his students out here to demonstrate different ecological principles, and he actually coined the term ecological succession, I believe, in relation to the dune habitat because it's so easy to demonstrate, and marram grass is like the fundamental species in that. So essentially, the dunes it's a bunch of sand that was deposited by the glaciers that formed both the flat plains of the Midwest, as well as it eventually melted and became it was Lake Chicago first, but then it kind of broke down into smaller Great Lakes like Lake Michigan as well. We now have, and so all this sand was left over from glacial deposits, and there's constantly northwest winds hitting it, so they're shifting all the sand around, breaking it up. So these sand dunes are not permanent. Like they shift around. Mount Tom will one day no longer exist, or just be a little anthill. So it's a really hard habitat for plants to get established in. But marram grass is especially adapted to this kind of harsh conditions. So what happens is basically little pockets get hit by the wind less, and they're shifting less, and then some marram grass seeds get in there and they grow, and then so their roots down under fortify the sand, and they kind of clump it all together and basically create the ability to have dunes where there's like areas that are locked in place more so than the rest of all this shifting sands. So, and then when the roots and the organic matter all dies, like the plant dies, it goes back into the soil and becomes organic matter, and then it mixes in with the sand and makes a slightly more nutrient-rich substrate. So that is how other species, especially Schizachyrium scoparium, which is little blue stem, it's a very cool grass. You can see there's its flowering structures right there. So those plants can get established. Also, hairy puccoon.
Touch my hairy puccoon.
Which is Lithiosperma. That's another common flower that's really cool, really hardy. It's out here a lot. There's other species too, but it's mostly these two at these points in just these smaller little pockets where the marram grass has been able to fortify. And then continuing this, there's more fortification because there's more different kinds of species. There's more organic matter being added to the substrate. So then you can see these cottonwoods, populous species that are able to establish, especially on the banks of the outermost dunes.
On the north side of these pure white dunes, okay?
And obviously, they have much larger root structures and they go much deeper into the soil. When they die, or every year, the leaves die and add a lot of organic matter to the soil, but then also when they fully die, they add a huge chunk of this big log that further fortifies the soil, and then that obviously creates what you can see behind here, which is more interesting species. The dunes are really hard to climb, by the way. They're like incredibly tedious to go up, but they take like 2 seconds to come down from. So back there you can see more varied species. You have jack pines and sassafras, some juniper bushes and things like that. Occasionally, I think there's some oaks starting here. I think more specifically, there's more red oaks. And then as you get further back, all of these trees have established, the soil becomes more soil rather than sand, although it has a high sand content in it. And then you get lots of other species like, I think there's more white pines, there's more white and black oaks for whatever reason, but lots of other trees. And then further on from that, you can, those species will much greater fortify the structures, and there's lots of habitats all back in there. There's lots of kinds of forests and lots of kinds of wetlands like swamps and bogs, maybe some fens. I think there's prairies, stuff like that. So basically the marram grass fortifying this inhabitable soil slowly creates way for more species, and that creates more species, and that creates more species, and overall it creates this very biodiverse region where you can see the process of succession, where one species or one ecological community makes way for another ecological community, and so on and so forth. So I think we're going to go explore a little bit and try to find a place to camp. Although, actually, you know, I might try to find, because it's 19, whatever I said, 17. So some of these people that were in the Prairie Club, or at least supposedly they were in the Prairie Club, are William and Flora Richardson. They were two kind of academic, I don't know what you would call them, advocates for the for the preservation of the dunes, and so they bought a vacation home out here supposedly, and they were, as you can imagine, they were also really into American ethnobotany or indigenous cultures and stuff. So supposedly they built a teepee in their backyard. Sorry, it's hard to travel through all this shit. And they called it Sassafras Lodge, and Alice supposedly would... Oh shit, is that it? Yeah, there it is. Oh, look at that. Yeah, so sassafras is actually my favorite plant of all time, my favorite tree, whatever. So yeah, they built this fairly accurate teepee just for, I don't know, because shits and giggles, whatever. And then, so Alice, for her first couple nights, she came out here on October 31st, which is Halloween, and she lived out in her shack, or she lived out in the dunes for a couple days, and then she found George Bragg's shack, which she named Driftwood, and she started staying there. But then it got super cold, and you'd imagine that that little shack would be better protected from cold than a fucking teepee, but I think because the teepee is more back up in the dunes and like hidden by all these trees and stuff, and her shack was probably out on the shore, it probably made more sense for her to live here, more sheltered from the wind and whatever other reasons. But they actually like she didn't ask permission. She just started fucking living in this teepee her first winter here, and then at some point Flora like caught her and was like, there's some fucking chick like living in our teepee, William. But they I guess they were cool with her or liked her vibe, so they let her stay there for the winter. Although it does seem like they got tired of her shit, like they kicked her out ish, or they said like the camp was filthy. So I don't know what went down there, but it's kind of interesting. So yeah, this is actually where Alice stayed for her first winter. So we'll stay here for the night. It's getting pretty late now, so I think I'll go gather some firewood, and then yeah, we'll camp here, and then tomorrow we can go travel further down the dunes and see if we can find driftwood and anything else interesting and relevance to this.
Alright, so I found some firewood, and I also found on an old oak tree some chicken in the woods. This is Latiporus cincinnatus, which is like the lighter colored variety that's less common. So while this cooks up, I thought maybe I could kind of give some background information on Alice and her life. So she had 3 brothers and 2 much older sisters, or like 10 plus years older. They grew up in a working class ish town in Chicago. Her parents both died when she was like in her teens, her dad first and then her mom. So she kind of had like an early independent streak. But despite this, somehow, whether it was a wealthy family member or a scholarship, somehow she got into the University of Chicago, and she did exceptionally well from what we know. She studied a bunch of different topics like literature, ethics, logic, mathematics, astronomy, but she was, I guess, particularly drawn to or talented in mathematics, which is kind of interesting, and I think she was particularly interested in astronomy mathematics and just astronomy in general, which kind of is interesting. But yeah, so she got her undergraduate there, and then she, at the last couple of years of her undergrad and afterwards, she worked at the U.S. Naval Observatory as a computer. Like, if you've ever seen Hidden Figures, you know, those ladies that would, like, do the math, like they were computers before computers, right? So she would do that, which is incredibly menial and mostly was done by women, and even in that context, it's incredibly fucking boring and difficult. Like, you have to be insanely talented, but then you also don't get to use your talents to do anything except fucking run numbers, basically. So she did that for a while, and it probably weared on her soul deeply. And then she decided to go to grad school, and she went, I think, for a year to Germany somewhere, and then she came back to finish her grad program in the University of Chicago again. But about a year before she was finished, she just fucking quit. Like, she just dropped out and stopped doing it. So this is where we get to, like, why she came out to the dunes, and it's kind of confusing, and there's a lot of speculation, and I feel like I'm gonna misrepresent, but this is just basically my opinion based on what I've read from her writing. But most of her writing is published, like, by newspapers and stuff, so it's possible that they edited it or they made it up, although it does seem to be written in her voice. But yeah, so it's just kind of hard to tell. But so basically, it seems like, well, when she was first interviewed after going to the dunes, she said it wasn't about a man, but then later she published this, and it does, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm misreading something, but it seems like directly because of a man. So it seems like there was some kind of older, like, academic figure who was writing a book about sex, I think in like an academic context, like the nature of human sexuality. I also think his name was Leonard, because she just calls him L, but at one point she says Len instead, so I assume his name was Leonard. So he was writing a book about sex, and I guess she was friends with him or helping him write the book, or some kind of combination of this, or they were lovers, or some kind of affair, or I don't know, it's pretty unclear, but some kind of complicated situation there. The dude's writing a book about sex, you know what I mean? I think probably like she wanted a relationship, and then he was like, oh, this incredibly clearly intelligent woman wants to talk to me about sex and kind of like give me attention. And then she was like, so are we gonna like be in love now? And he was like, no, I'm too complex for sex. I'm a academic, I write about it. And then fucking, you see what I'm saying? Like, you get the vibe. But I don't know, that's just complete speculation, so who knows what actually happened there. But for some reason, after this, near the end of her grad program, and also after doing all these menial jobs where she was doing nothing with her incredible intelligence, basically, she got in the fucking train and just left Chicago and went as far as she could, which was the dunes, supposedly to end her life. But then I guess she just decided to stay. I don't know if she had read Thoreau or what, but she just was like, fuck it, I'll live out here. And like I have said, like, other people lived out here, but they were all men. So no one really paid them any attention. But basically, she lived out near the lake, and she would, like, you know, clean herself every once in a while. So she would bathe in the lake, and then, like, fishermen or, you know, tourists or whatever, like, there weren't that many people out here at the time, started catching glimpses of her, and it was like some chick is just out there nude in the lake. And then, like, the newspapers caught onto it, and it became like this story, like, you know, it was just something that could fill the newspapers, and people really like got interested in it. Like, oh, there's some chick out there, she only wears men's clothes and she bathes nude in Lake Michigan. Like, I don't know, it was just kind of a sensationalist, interesting story. And then eventually, because she got a bunch of publicity, like, people started coming to the area firstly to see her, but then also, like, it brought a lot of attention to the dunes that were just kind of like this random area outside of Chicago. But this was also at the same time that there was a lot of groups trying to fight to preserve the dunes, and Diana actually spoke publicly. She went to a conference and wrote this beautiful piece of writing where she advocates for protecting the dunes, and it's very interesting. She also, there's kind of a public perception that she was like a recluse, like she just wanted to be left alone, which probably is true in terms of, like, she didn't want fucking newspapers and, like, tourists and shit, like, going into her house and fucking with her shit, you know what I mean? But she was, like, very friendly. Like, she would befriend local families. She, like, took little girls on, like, nature walks and stuff like that. Most people in the area liked her. You know, there was these conservationists that liked her, and, you know, she spoke at probably multiple of their events. She also, you know, she would read constantly. She later met a man named Paul Wilson, and they began a relationship. So she didn't just want to, like, go die alone. She just didn't want to fucking live in Chicago, it seems like. And what triggered it was this specific, probably romantic, probably pseudo-professional thing that happened in her life, and it just like broke her, all in combination with what is the point of being alive and all that. So yeah, that's why she ended up out here. Okay, so I think we're getting close. That might be it over there. Let's see. Yeah, that must be it. Huh, wow. Oh yeah, there's smoke. Dang, I kinda hope she's not home. That would be awkward. Wow. Alright, so... yeah, look at that. So this is Driftwood. This was a shack that was inhabited by a man named George Bragg, and then he died or abandoned it or whatever, and Alice moved in. So you can see she's got a duck hanging there. She was apparently quite a good shot, especially with ducks, which is awesome. You can see, look, chop wood, carry water, all that. We got a little fire going. Wow, okay. I feel apprehensive about this. It might be kind of invasive to just enter some woman's shack, but she's been dead for 100 years, so I don't know. I'm not gonna beat myself up about it. What she got going out? Out here, some persimmons, fucking deku seeds, whatever. That's odd. Okay. Well, I'm gonna just knock on the door, and I guess I'm just gonna go inside.
Some invited themselves inside
What
to
the
take a
fuck
look.
are those voices? Whatever. Alright. Huh. Wow. What a fucking psychopath. Alright. Okay, so, yeah, one of the few things we know about Alice is that she read like a fucking crazy person. She would walk for miles down the shore to go to the library and rent books. Yeah. Wow. So she's got a wood stove here, which is pretty much essential to this kind of lifestyle. You can still see it burning a little bit in there, which is weird because it's the summer, but I guess there's reason to have a fire. I don't know. So, oh, those are those books that I was telling you about that kind of highlight all these funny characters out in the dune by Earl H. Reed. Really great books. Highly recommend. Very weird, obscure. You can see she's reading fucking Walt Whitman. Who would have thought? Wild. She's got a... what is that? Pears? She's got a crate of pears and some cabbage or shit like that. I don't... what the fuck even is any of this shit? She's canning stuff. Oh, that's definitely nettles. I really like nettles. They're one of my favorite plants. I feel like they speak to me in soft whispers. Yeah, she's made some kind of meal here. She's got some grimy looking eggs. What the fuck is any of this shit? That's interesting. My grandma used to hang copper pots. That was like a thing about her. She's got a shotgun or a rifle here. I don't know. I'm not good at guns. Yeah, a little bed. So by this point, she didn't have a partner yet. Later into the saga, she marries, but probably not officially marries, a man named Paul Wilson, but it seems like they're not living here. And then shortly after that, she moved down further onto the shore, and they built Wren's Nest. So you can see, ooh, she's got some fucking psycho woodland shit journals. I could read them or try to steal them and take them, because so the journals, like, there's multiple references that she wrote and read constantly, so she probably has some crazy Thoreau-esque journals, but they were lost to time, they were burnt or destroyed or whatever. So you'd think, okay, well, I'm here right now, and they already get destroyed, so I might as well steal them now and take them into the future and then be able to read them. But then, because time travel, you know, so if I do that, then I'm like, I'll drop them or something like that, and then I'll be the reason that they never get found. So I'm just gonna fucking leave them where they are, which is kind of tantalizing, because who fucking knows what just ungodly beautiful words are in these journals here, but fuck it, whatever. She's got some tea or something going. The fuck is that? That looks not okay. That looks like there's mold or something in there. Fuck it, whatever. yeah, I don't even know really what I hope to accomplish by being in here, but I'm kind of freaking out right now. This is pretty amazing. Let me just look at whatever fucking book she's reading. Carl Jung, book about soup. I like that. Wasn't there soup somewhere around here? Yeah, there's a bowl of soup there. I wonder what that is. Fucking pea or something like that. I don't know. Not pea like pits, but like pea soup. You know what I mean? She's got a bunch of firewood. She's kind of shittily tacked up some kind of hide or something. Bucket of mushrooms. That's all. I didn't know she was into mushrooms. And there's a whole bunch of books about mushrooms too. Bunch of seeds. Whatever. Yeah, I don't even know. I don't really want to leave this place, but I kind of don't want her to catch me looking in her shack. This feels a little voyeuristic. I don't know how to feel about the ethics of this, but it does feel important to document aspects of her life, and like she is dead and all her journals were destroyed or whatever, so whatever. I guess I'll go out and look around. Let me shut the door. Yeah, so cutting wood, some fucking eggshells or something. She did get groceries. She had some form of income from some doctor or something that she worked for who would send her a couple dollars every month, and she knew some people that kind of lived out in homesteads and stuff out in the Dune area, and she would have them pick up her groceries for her. Let's see if there's anything else back here. Just some kind of thing to store wood in, and yeah, I don't know, there's more fucking loose. And you ever just like shit your pants because the world is so fucking beautiful? Like, how the fuck does that happen? Why does no one give a shit about grasses? I love grasses. And this country is grass obsessed, just the fucking wrong who wants a lawn? Look at this shit. Isn't that mind-boggling? God damn. Oh, there's a little patch of nettles. I guess that's her supply. Yeah, I don't know. That's driftwood. I don't really know what else to say, but it's pretty remarkable. I feel like I fucking went through a lot to get here, and now that I'm here, I'm like, well, shit, I don't know. Fucking shack. But it's pretty spectacular if you think about it. Because of increased media attention, Alice and Paul moved up to Ogden Dunes and built a second, larger shack that they called Wren's Nest. In the summer of 1922, a college student stumbled upon a dead, charred body somewhere in the vicinity of Driftwood. There is no reason to believe that Alice and Paul, who had already moved away, had anything to do with this murder. However, multiple news outlets linked them to the case because it made for an interesting story. A police deputy named Eugene Frank was interviewed and propagated speculation about Alice and Paul's involvement despite having no evidence. On June 14th, Alice and Paul went to Eugene Frank's house unarmed with the intent of quelling the rumors peacefully. A drunken Eugene then proceeded to shoot Paul in the foot and beat Alice in the head with the butt of his gun. Following her head injury, Alice was hospitalized. Though she was soon released and returned to the dunes, she never fully emotionally or physically recovered from the injury. 3 years later, on the morning of February 9th, 1925, Alice died of kidney failure in her shack. Her final wish was to be cremated with her ashes spread from the top of Mount Tom. A grief-stricken Paul did deliriously attempt to build a funeral pyre on top of Mount Tom and burn her body, but seemingly was dissuaded by her family. Alice's body still lies in Oak Hill Cemetery in Chicago. So the Indiana Dune Country, like Chicago herself, is the child of Lake Michigan and the Northwest Wind. It is indeed. The land her great wind gave her from the lake, where naught of man endures before the suns. Besides its nearness to Chicago and its beauty, its spiritual power, there is between the Dune Country and the city a more than sentimental bond, a family tie. To see the dunes destroyed would be for Chicago the sacrilegious sin which is not forgiven. As a dower for her sons and her daughters, this heedless young city shall take this gift of the wind and the waters from her mother, her lake.